Okay, up next we have Jeff Joseph, and he is from Modern Trader. If you look in your gift bags that you were given when you checked in, you'll have a magazine in there called Modern Trader. That's his magazine, so make sure you check that out. He is going to be hosting a panel that is about investing offshore and online. Would you please welcome Jeff Joseph, who will introduce our panelists.
Thanks. Good morning. We were actually backstage just wondering if OJ, if there's any word from that yet. So that's the only thing you're allowed to interrupt us for, by the way, is an OJ status. But thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Joseph, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to be introducing you shortly to our panelists. Just as very quick background, Naomi just was kind enough to mention that our magazine, Modern Trader magazine, is in your gift bags. It's actually a proud moment for us. I haven't been to this event before in the past, yet to have our publication, which is a 45-year-old investment monthly, in the same bag with Reason magazine, which is a magazine I've admired for years and years and years, has been a real pleasure. In this issue that you'll find that we provided complimentary to everybody, we also did an exclusive interview with Steve Forbes and an economic roundtable with Austin Goolsbee, Stephen Moore, Grover Norquist. So I hope you enjoy it. Oh, and a Paris Accord op-ed piece that I think this crowd will appreciate as well. So please feel free to take a look at the magazines, and again, thanks for having me. My background's really investments. Long before being a publisher, everyone in this room claims they have some knowledge or expertise in one area, and for me, it's certainly in the investment space, particularly investment due diligence. I've sat in front of literally hundreds, 400 or 500 private investments, hedge funds, doing forensic and deep due diligence, trying to vet out the wheat from the chaff and the signal from the noise. That's the objective of our publication, Modern Trader, every month to our 60,000 subscribers. But it's also the objective of this panel today. When I was told that I'd be moderating a panel on offshore investing, my first thought was vetting out the principles, and fortunately that work was already done. We all know that you should be diversified in your investment portfolio. That's a given. But diversification means different things to different people, and certainly diversification into alternative investments and offshore investments is still something that people talk about but don't necessarily execute. Years ago, I built a team of individual 40-Act mutual fund investments that became the first suite of mutual funds in the alternative space that ever hit $3 billion in assets. It's part of my background to understand the alternative investment world, and what I was really pleased about is how well they vetted out this group. So you have a couple key things working for you. You have diversity, because we have Michael Cobb, who's the chairman and CEO of ECI Development, representing luxury and residential, recreational, and investment real estate properties in 4 different Caribbean countries. And then next to him is Zafar Khan, who's the CEO of Outpost, which is a unique cybersecurity company with an extraordinary IP patent portfolio. And then, not finally by any means, because most of you would be very familiar with Peter Zipper, who's been at this conference for many, many years, who is the president of Caye Bank. So we're going to be speaking, and the purpose of this is kind of like a sampler because we only have a few minutes here. So the notion of this panel was really to allow you to understand what they're doing, what they represent, and to have an opportunity to vet them out, because each one of them are going to be hosting sessions in the hours to come later on today. So I want to start with Michael. Michael, we were chatting backstage, and one of the things we talked about is that so many people lend lip service to the notion of real estate investments overseas. In fact, 1 in 10 people, perhaps in this room, would contemplate owning investment property or recreational property overseas. But that's kind of where things stop. A lot of people contemplate it, and not everyone moves forward. So, Michael, help us out, and I know that's what you're going to be doing later on today, but what would be, and you take this, what would be the number one starting point? What does an investor have to do really to contemplate how to most effectively, safely, and properly, and perhaps successfully secure an offshore investment property?
A great question, Jeff, and it's nice to be with you all this morning.
It better be a great question. We planned this question.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the answer to that question actually is very brief, and the answer is simply 2 words: due diligence. Due diligence. See, when we go offshore, we go into the wild, wild west. We do. We go into a land of buyer beware, and that is foreign to us as North Americans. I think most of us are North Americans here. And so we go into this buyer beware environment and we don't really get it. We don't know what we don't know. Hear me on that. We don't know what we don't know. And so that the simple answer to your question is due diligence. But if it's okay, I'm gonna move off to the side here for a second. I like to do a little exercise, especially with libertarians. I was in here yesterday when Greg was speaking, and he asked how many people were libertarian, how many people were conservatives, and then he asked how many people were liberal, and one woman in the back raised her hand. And it doesn't matter whether we're liberal, conservative, or libertarian. Here's a question by applause. How many people in this room are concerned with the direction that the United States is moving, either politically, economically, socially, or on a freedom basis? How many people have concerns about where this country is headed? Applause, please. Okay. Now we're going to take it a step further. A little bit of audience participation. Please, everybody, stand up. This is easy. Just stand up right where you are. So here's the exercise. Here's the exercise. If you are more than 10% sure that we're headed in a bad direction, stay standing. If you're more than 10% sure, if you're more than 25% sure we're headed in a bad direction, stay standing. If you are 50% sure that we're headed in a bad direction, stay standing. Okay, everybody who's standing is 50% sure that we are headed in a bad direction. So here's the question. Would everybody who has a second residency outside of the United States or Canada please stay standing? Congratulations. Everybody give these folks a round of applause. Congratulations. Napoleon Hill says that action is the highest measure of intelligence. Action is the highest measure of intelligence. And so what are we doing? If we believe, if somebody told us, if a doctor said, you've got a 50% chance of having a heart attack, in a year or two, and we didn't have insurance, would you go buy insurance? I would, right? 50%, you're going to have a heart attack. If you're 50% or greater sure that the U.S. is headed towards a train wreck in one of these areas, what are you doing? But the real question, and this is really where the rubber meets the road. What can we do, right? What can we do to protect ourselves? How can we get a second residency? Remember this, that we like to say to ourselves, well, if things get bad, I'm just going to go to Panama, or I'm going to go to Belize, or I'm going to go to Portugal, or I'm going to go somewhere, right? And that's fine. You can, as an American, you can probably get on the airplane and go most places visa-free. But here's the real question. How do we stay? When our 30-day tourist visa is up, we're now an illegal immigrant in one of these countries. All right? How do we stay? See, getting a second residency is like being a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout. It's be prepared. And they're not that expensive. Actually, they're pretty inexpensive, actually, to get. And so what can we do today? There's one thing you can do right now. It's so easy, it's so simple. In your bags, you have a form from the Belize Advantage. At the bottom of it, just jot down your information and write right on the top of it, second residency, and hand it in. We will send you information on residency programs around the world. You can preview them, you can see them, you can understand them, and see if it's something you like. That's what you can do today, right now. It's so simple, so easy. Be prepared. Napoleon Hill, action today is the highest measure of intelligence. And I hope that many of you will do that, and that some of you will pursue a second residency, because the most important asset we have We talk about asset diversification and asset protection. The single most important asset we have is us. How are we protecting ourselves? So, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Michael, you're hosting a session later on today. What time is that? What time is your session later today?
Oh, 2 o'clock. We'll go
o'clock?
into this a little bit deeper. Thank you. Yeah, 2 o'clock.
Thank you. And again, diversification is not just about asset classes. It's also about domiciles and international markets, emerging markets. And it also goes from public to private securities as well. I really come from a private security background and have been involved in venture capital for the last couple of decades. And for me, it's always refreshing to know that there are people that are running private ventures that have the pedigree that's worthy of them. There's a question that's often asked of venture capital investors, and that is, do they prefer the jockey or the horse? And invariably, those of us who've had our fair share of successful and unsuccessful outcomes in venture know that the jockey is far more important. A great jockey can run any horse to a victory. And that's why pedigree is so critical. So it's wonderful to speak with Zafir here, because not only is he a Goldman alumni and a Deloitte alumni and a Wharton MBA, but he also has a rich technology patent portfolio in the Silicon Valley private venture company that he has, which happens to be in cybersecurity, which Modern Trader magazine called the sector to own earlier this year. So it was a pleasure to get to know him and learn a little bit more about his company and the portfolio and its history. But I think the very first question I had for him, which I'll share with all of you, is how did it come to be that you were domiciled in Bermuda? Why did this rich Silicon Valley-based technology company choose Bermuda as its home?
Thank you. Similar to what Mike was saying, it's important to be prepared before you need to be prepared. And what we did is we looked at our business when we started out, and we focused on, our business focuses on cybersecurity, protecting people like you from hackers, eavesdroppers, identity thieves, and elsewhere. We are one of the worldwide leaders today in secure and certified electronic communications. And so what we looked at is, if our market is this audience, the businesses that you operate and you work in, you individually, this audience is far bigger than just in the United States. Our business market, our customer base is worldwide today. Before we built the business, we made the decision. Before we built the intellectual property, the patents, we made the decision, should we do it entirely in the United States, or should we diversify internationally? Should we set up the route as a Bermuda company in a tax-favorable, protected structure that wholly owns the operating subsidiaries that operate in countries around the world? Is our market just in the US, or is our market worldwide? And so we started as a Bermuda company. We picked Bermuda as a jurisdiction because it's well-established British law. It also has tax-favorable status to roll revenue and profits and license royalty up into the Bermuda parent company. That allows us to, in time, dividend more or invest more of the profits in growth for the benefit of our shareholders, as opposed to in taxes for various countries around the world. Mm-hmm. So the focus was set the structure up in the beginning to be prepared when you need that preparation, and to think of our business as a worldwide market for cybersecurity.
Right. Could you tell us a little bit more about the background of your business?
Our core product that we pioneered is called registered email. It is providing senders with the ability to track and prove who said what when on the internet. Has anyone here sent an email and someone said they didn't get it? I hear some giggles out there. Yes. And it usually happens when that email has some kind of consequence. So the initial invention is called registered email, and we built a patent portfolio to protect our technologies to track and prove. We added encryption, we added e-signatures, we added email imposter protection and other security technologies around this. And today we have thousands of corporate customers and millions in revenue operating, using our technology in all industries in many countries around the world.
Terrific. And you're hosting a lunch
We have a hosted lunch right after this at 12 noon. We have a hospitality suite this afternoon and a dinner this evening. So if you're interested in learning more about our post as an accredited investor, please stop by our booth, booth number 434. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And finally, as I said, he's no stranger to this audience. Peter Zipper, who's the president of Caye International Bank, which is based in Belize. And to complete this diversification theme, we've already heard about private recreational and residential property, private investment opportunities in the form of venture. But then, of course, there's the broader universe of publicly traded securities, anything from stocks and bonds to commodities and currencies and even precious metals. And what's unique about Peter's background is that he has helped thousands and thousands of investors create portfolios that can trade U.S. securities, emerging market securities, precious metals, bank instruments, et cetera, but based in Belize. And nobody knows more about Belize in this room than Peter. So Peter, I'm going to start with the question, why Belize?
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. The question, why Belize? Well, it is the best offshore banking country in the world. I wouldn't have said that 30 years ago. I got into the business 36 years ago, worked for half a dozen banks, and for the last 10 years down in Belize. As a matter of fact, it was 10 years in October last year. But why Belize? As I said already, it's the best offshore banking country in the world. Why would that be? It's because of the laws. Whenever you look at offshore banking, look at the laws that exist, the banking laws that exist in that country where you want to do your banking. There are many countries out there that do offshore banking, but only a handful of them really stick out. Belize is one of them. And I want to give you the two highlights when it comes to Belize. One, they still have bank secrecy. It's not a thing that's dead. It's still out there. So someone walked up to me this morning at the booth and said, well, what if my estranged wife walks into the bank and wants to know information on my bank account? Well, how would we react? We would throw her out. That's it. We cannot talk to her, okay? There's bank secrecy, period, and it's the law. And the second one is a 24% liquidity. It's the highest in the world. There are what, 214, 216 countries around the world these days? Out of all those countries, we have the highest liquidity requirement of all of them, 24%. So what that means is a quarter out of every dollar inside a Belizean bank must be liquid. So often people ask me, so how did you do in 2008? Well, we didn't faze us. We just breezed right through it. As a matter of fact, 2008 was the bank's best year. Okay, so those are the kinds of things you want to look at. Do you need an awful lot of money, oodles of money to open a bank account? And I'm saying this because there are plenty of countries, their banks, especially European banks, have very high minimums. The bank I started with 36 years ago was a Swiss bank. Their minimum was $3 million. Not everybody has $3 million kicking around at home to go to Switzerland. So with us, it's $1,000 and you're in. $1,000. So what that means is you don't need to sell your family farm to open a bank account in Belize. Okay, so I'm going to talk about all that at our breakout session. It'll be at 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. in the Bordeaux room, I believe it is. Yeah, Bordeaux room at 2 p.m. And we're going to talk about all this stuff in a lot more detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. And thank you all. Our task was to get this program back on schedule, so I think we accomplished that. As you know, each one of them will have an opportunity to speak with you a little bit further. And let me invite you again, take a look at Modern Trader magazine, which we're pleased to be here. Thank you much.